Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, the Indian government takes a bit of a bashing. Well, not just from me, much as I love India, but the United States starts the bashing with their latest Commission on Religious Freedom report. Well, unsurprisingly, the Indian government gets a bit of a shameful pasting for its human rights abuses. But will the Trump administration listen though? The big question. And Punjabis have a go too, this time at Amit Shah, who visited the region to be met with, well, a bit of an uprising and seeing effigies of himself burning across the Punjabi landscape. And of course, Sikhs for Justice has a go too. Well, why not? But this time highlighting some outrageous double dealing by Modi with the Iranian regime. It's all smiles, handshakes and buying billions of dollars of US arms, but just who happens to be helping arm Iran at the same time to fight the US? Well, guess who? Doesn't take a genius to work that out. All this and more on today's show, and of course loads of great comments at the end of the show, so do stay tuned for that. Right, a lot to get through this morning, and I'm going to start with this report. Yes, this is the United States Commission on International Religious Freedoms. They produce this report every year, and this year's come out. And I would actually point you, I was going to in fact discuss this in a podcast with one of my regular podcast guests, Dr. Sandhu, last Friday. Apologies for those waiting for the podcast. It didn't get uploaded on Friday. There were a few issues. We weren't quite happy with the podcast. We decided to re-record it. So we will re-record it and release it this Thursday. And we will actually dig into this report itself in much more detail and have a good, proper discussion about it for those who want a bit more detail. But I just want to quickly just sort of go through it today. And really, we always look to Washington with a close eye because essentially the United States it often dictates the moral and political direction for the rest of the world. In other words, what the US states publicly as its policy, a lot of certainly the Western world seems sort of to fall into step with it. So I want to dive into this report just sort of at least to some degree, just to give you a clue about what was covered. So it is the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USGRF. It's an independent, bipartisan federal body, and their job is to basically tell the truth to the US State Department, the government, even if that truth just happens to be a little bit uncomfortable for its strategic allies, as turns out quite often the case. And it is for the 7th year running that this report's been released, and it is the 7th year running that they have recommended that India be designated as a country of particular concern, a CPC as it's called. And it's a category reserved for the world's worst offenders, and it includes nations like North Korea, China, Iran, who engage in, quote, systematic, ongoing and egregious violations of religious freedom. So this is the world's largest democracy, it calls itself, sitting in bed in the same category as North Korea, China, Iran. I mean, seriously? Again, there's absolutely no shame from India. However, this report, and every year, in fact, I remember this time last year reporting about last year's report, saying pretty much the same sort of stuff. Where, again, the recommendation was for India to become a CPC, a country of particular concern. What is different this year, though? There is a difference, and it's an important difference. This report is much sharper. It's more specific. And for the Sikh community, it is perhaps the most validating document that we've seen yet from a Western government in decades. This is really taking it now a step further. And this again is proving that we are making progress, highlighting the truth to not just to the world, but importantly to the leaders of Western nations. Now, the 2026 report documents a, quote, continued and significant deterioration throughout 2025. And those things aren't getting better, they're getting worse. So, we're right, as it turns out. And it paints a picture of a nation where the law is no longer a shield for the citizen, but a weapon for the state. And how often have we talked about how the Indian government have weaponized the law against its political opponents? And in the report, it describes an environment where, and I quote from the report, let me just show you actually, this is, there are 2 pages dedicated to India. That's the second page there, which goes into a lot more sort of specific detail about the weaponizing of the law. The first page is a bit of a summary. What it does, the key findings, I have to say, is actually quite shocking. It does give a whole list of examples of these abuses of human rights. And they, in this section, reports an environment where, and quoting it, it says the Indian government continued to expand its repressive tactics to target religious minorities abroad, specifically members of the Sikh community and their advocates. So we get a specific mention about transnational oppression. Surprise, surprise. So let's, I just want to break down how they're doing this in this report, because it isn't just about street violence anymore. It's about weaponising the law, or lawfare as it's called. And this report talks about a trinity of laws being weaponised to crush dissent and target minorities. And this is primarily on the second page. There we go, just in case you want to zoom in and have a look at that. But I'll give you a quick summary anyway. It talks, unsurprisingly, about this awful piece of legislation, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, the UAPA. This is India's primary anti-terror law. But in practice, in reality, it's a jail without trial card. You only need to look at people like Amritpal Singh and others who are suffering under this, as well as the NSA, National Security Act. But basically, USGovt notes that the government is using this UAPA to detain activists, journalists, and basically anyone documenting religious freedom violations in India. Secondly, the other act is the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, the FCRA. This is a terrible piece of legislation. By cutting off funding, the starving NGOs and charities that serve minority communities. So basically, they're using this this sort of piece of legislation. Essentially, if they see a charity or an NGO that's a non-governmental organisation highlighting the fact of Indian government failures or persecution, they're ensuring that their sources of funding are cut off, because of course they rely on sources of funding to keep going, to highlight and hold the government to account. But this piece of legislation basically allows the Indian government to legally cut off all their funding, should it see fit. Anyway, but for us, actually, the most alarming development in this report is the mention of the new criminal codes, the Bharatiya I can't pronounce this, Nyaya Sanhita. Sorry, that's my Hindi. My dreadful Hindi. But these new criminal codes, and I did report on this at the time, they've replaced the old British era laws that they inherited from the British. And there's all sorts of questionable elements of this. And I did talk about this way back when it happened. But anyway, the report warns that these new laws particularly leave minorities vulnerable, susceptible to targeting under the vague guise of endangering the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India, quote. That might sound familiar. Well, that's exactly the same language used to criminalise the peaceful advocacy for Sikh self-determination for Khalistan. They use this statement, endangering the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India, against the Khalistan movement. That's how they managed to lock up Khalistanis as soon as they stick their head above the parapet. So, but I want also to talk about another law, and this often flies under the radar, but it's a deeply, deeply insidious, dangerous piece of legislation. It is the anti-conversion laws. Now, currently in India, 12 out of 28 states, that's almost half, have these anti-conversion laws on their books. And on the surface, the government claims they're there to prevent forced conversion. I mean, if you play devil's advocate, you can sort of understand why these laws make sense. They're on the face of it. Yeah, we've got to stop any religion forcibly converting any other individual, and particularly vulnerable individuals, into that religion. But of course, it's not really just about that. And we all know really where it's aimed at. Of course, it's the Islamic community. Now, currently, as I say, almost half of Indian states have got these anti-conversion laws on their books. But if you need to dig into these laws to really work out how they're being used and abused by the Indian state. In August last year, Rajasthan, for example, adopted a law that is really, really actually quite terrifying. It requires, get this, in Rajasthan, if you plan to change your religion voluntarily, you've got to give the government 2 months' notice. I mean, think about that. The state in Rajasthan demands you have an obligation to report to the state about your soul. before you change your mind. So you've got to, if you suddenly feel, actually, I want to change, if I want to convert to some religion, doesn't matter what, you've got to inform the state with 2 months' notice. What sort of country is this? I mean, this is supposedly a democracy. I'm actually struggling for words because I just find this whole concept absolutely outrageous. We have here in the UK what's called the nanny state. So if the state interferes in our personal affairs, we call it the nanny state, and it's outrageous. We always push back and reject it. The state has no business, no right in any democracy to interfere in personal freedoms, particularly like your religious freedoms. And yet, in 12 out of 28 states in India, you have to report in advance, give notice to the state that you want to convert religion. It is absolutely none of the state's business what your religion, what your faith is, which God you worship, whatever. But anyway, that's what's happening. And this report highlights this specific requirement, noting that it does violate international privacy rights. I mean, that's the legal perception of it. It violates international privacy rights. But every possible moral, fibrous part of your being rejects this as deeply wrong. Anyway, the report continues to quote the requirement where authorities demand, and this is a quote, individuals planning to change religion voluntarily must notify the government 2 months in advance. Anyone conducting a conversion must give 1 month's notice. So both sides, if somebody's converting you, the other person's also got to give notice. And what if you don't do it? Well, in some states, they're proposing life imprisonment. In Uttarakhand, they've even criminalised what's called digital speech about religion, if it's deemed to be illegal conversion activity. This is the state reaching not just into your phone, but also into your heart. The state is actually ultimately surveilling your life, your digital existence, and what goes on up here and in here. This is supposedly the world's largest democracy. Terrifying. And in the report, the real headline of this report, this is really interesting. For the first time, US Govt has gone just beyond simply criticising the Indian government like they have done in previous years. They're now actually, in the recommendations, they're calling for targeted sanctions on specific entities. Who? Well, number one, the Research and Analysis Wing, RAW, yes, India's Foreign Intelligence Agency. And secondly, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the RSS. So for the first time, and again, this is significant, really significant now. So they have actually specifically identified the very bodies that we on a daily basis are highlighting who is behind both persecution domestically and transnational oppression internationally. RAW and the RSS. Finally, we have the US, essentially an entity of the US government recognising what's going on. I'm sure they've always known about it, but this is the first time they've actually put it into simple, unambiguous black and white. It is RAW, and it is the Indian state via the RSS. Or in fact, actually, ironically, it's the RSS via the Indian state. So the report links RAW unambiguously to transnational oppression. It cites the Canadian government's intelligence and the US Department of Justice investigation into, obviously, the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar and the attempted assassination of Gurpratap Singh Pannu. And US Govt is essentially saying in this report now that the Indian government is now a, quote, serial offender, that it exports its violence to the streets of Surrey, British Columbia and New York City. Hardeep Singh Nijjar, Gurpratap Singh Pannu. So they're calling now for the US to freeze the assets of RAW officials and RSS leaders. And this in itself is a massive, massive shift in rhetoric. It's huge, this, and not many people have really picked up on this. Of course, we have. It's unsurprising for us, and it's what we've been saying for a very, very long time. So India's response is always the same on this. They call this report biased and politically motivated. And they also claim that India is a, quote, vibrant democracy. Really? I mean, how much evidence do I need to talk about daily to prove that India is not a democracy? It's a democracy in claim only. You can't be a vibrant democracy when you're expelling Muslim citizens in Assam. as they did in July 2025, labelling them as infiltrators. You can't be a democracy when you're forcing Rohingya refugees, including Christians, into international waters and making them swim for their lives, as documented in May 2025. And you certainly aren't a democracy when you use your intelligence agencies, RAW, to hunt down Sikh advocates and Khalistanis in the West because you just simply don't like their politics. So the US Govt, this commission, has done its job. It's done it really well. It's laid out the evidence. The question is, though, will the the US State Department listen? Or will the strategic partnership with India continue to trump, excuse the pun, to trump the basic human right to exist and believe as one chooses? Well, we'll see, but we'll obviously be watching any response from Washington very closely over the coming weeks. It will be interesting to see if anything is actually done to act upon the recommendations in the report. But well done to the Commission, once again, highlighting the lack of freedom, the lack of democracy in India. But as always, it's the big question. What will the government itself do? Will they take note of these recommendations? Will they sanction RAW officers and RSS people? Time will tell. So, I talked about the international condemnation of the Indian government. Let's look at what's going on domestically. It's not just internationally that the Indian government takes a bit of a bashing. As I said, yes, domestically. In Punjab, well done Punjab, the farmers are up once again. And you can see there is an effigy. That is actually an effigy. Somebody or a load of people have made an effigy, a figure of Amit Shah that they've set light to. And apparently this occurred right across Punjab over the weekend. And it was on Saturday, a couple of days ago. India's Union Home Minister, Amit Shah, visited Punjab. He landed in Moga. He's often been described as the architect of the BJP's worst policies. And of course, his name crops up on a regular basis on our show. We know what sort of character he is. He basically represents this RSS-controlled government. Now, when he went to Punjab over the weekend, he called his visit the Badlav Rally. Now, Badlav means change. This is a rally for change, he said. Very political statement. But of course, for the people of Punjab, the only change that Shah is representing is a much deeper betrayal of this agricultural heartland to satisfy not Punjabi farmers, but New Delhi's geopolitical hunger. It's all about money, of course, and it's all about big business, big agriculture, corporations. Now, Amit Shah is all very well sounding the bugle for the Punjab Assembly elections coming up next year, but ultimately the state of Punjab was effectively under a very different kind of siege. He spoke in Moga. He spoke at the Kisan Mazdoor Morcha, the KMM. This is a massive coalition of farmers and labourers in the area. And as Shah spoke in Moga itself, the KMM coordinated a massive rebellion right across the state. Protests erupted at 32 locations across 19 districts. This is a well-organised uprising right across the whole of Punjab. And it went from Amritsar to Bhatinda. And the air wasn't filled with cheers for the BJP. Unsurprisingly, it was filled with basically the smoke of Amit Shah's effigies. They lit up the skies of Punjab with burning effigies of Amit Shah. And I can't speak, it's Monday morning, give me a break, as they say. In Amritsar's Ranjit Avenue, thousands gathered at the Dasera ground to hold a symbolic funeral for the central government. Oh dear. Now, this wasn't just a farmers' protest in the traditional sense. So we've had some fabulous protests, massive protests, particularly those in 2020 and 2021, and then again in 2023, 2024, when the farmers, who are certainly the first to rise up when they're not happy, and well done to those guys. Those protests really went on for a long time, and they actually managed to get a U-turn out of the Modi government. But this one wasn't just specifically a farmers' protest in the traditional sense, as I say. It's an act of political resistance against a government that Punjab increasingly views as a foreign occupier, as they're calling it. It's another West India company. That's again back to the days of the British Empire. Essentially, it's a colonial occupier of the area. And that's a phrase that was used in the Punjab Assembly this week. And again, this is significant, the language now being used. And whenever, let's say, this channel or any other Khalistani organisation uses the phrase, Gurbajan Singh Panoon says it regularly, they use the phrase that Punjab is colonised, is occupied by India. Then, of course, the Hindutva media are up in arms about it. They froth at the mouth. They can't bear this concept that Punjab is colonised. But essentially, it ultimately is. And this language is now being used publicly, even in the Punjab Assembly. They're referring essentially to colonisation of Punjab. And of course, this is very, very powerful language because it is now entering the concept of Khalistan publicly. And I often say, of course, the Khalistan movement has had to stay very much below the radar because the Indian government has made it very clear, if you march for Khalistan, we'll lock you up. Amritpal Singh is a prime example, and many others. But it's coming in by the back door. As I often say, you can't quell the people. You can't squash the people. You cannot squash democracy. The people always win in the end. And the phrase I often use, the metaphor, is it's like trying to squeeze a balloon in your hand. Doesn't matter how hard you squeeze, those little bubbles of freedom always manage to find the cracks. They'll always come out somewhere. You cannot beat the people. And the people are saying, we are being colonised in the Punjab. You are essentially a West India company. In other words, you're like the British. You're colonising the Punjab. You don't belong here. So this is really significant language being used. So just to quickly look at why are these farmers so angry? What is it that's generated this landscape, this fiery landscape of burning Amit Shahs? Well, it's all about the India-US interim trade agreement. Now, this is all about double standards, funnily enough. How familiar this is. Prime Minister Modi is telling the West that he is their indispensable partner. He tells the United States, for example, that India is a Vishwa Guru, a world leader. But back home, to secure this partnership with the US, he's allegedly selling out the sovereignty of India's farmers. Yes, he's basically turning on these guys and selling their soul just to tie up trade deals with the United States. So the KMM and the Punjab government are now out there sounding the alarm on a trade deal that basically to them is a complete surrender. Under this deal, the United States is demanding market access for heavily subsidised American agricultural products. And specifically that refers to soybean oil, maize and poultry feed. Now, the Chief Minister of Punjab, Bhagwant Mann, he's basically said it out very clearly in the Vidhan Sabha this week. And these are important numbers that he's actually come up with. And I'd say for once, he's actually doing a good job. In the United States, the average farm size is 500 acres. In the Punjab, the average farm size is 2.5 acres. So you can see the scale here, the difference. How can a Punjab farmer, already struggling with debt and a falling water table, we talk about the riparian problem there, the riparian rights, and a lack of water. So how can a Punjab farmer, laden with debt, struggling to irrigate his crops, compete with massive industrial-scale, state-subsidised American big agriculture? Of course they can't. So these guys are going to lose out massively to these huge American corporations with vast economies of scale. Basically going to put them out of business. They can't compete with that. So this trade deal isn't about free trade. It's about the annihilation, the destruction of these small farmers to pave the way for corporate monopolies. The Punjab Assembly unanimously passed a resolution condemning this deal. Said no way. They're calling it more dangerous than the 3 black farm laws that we saw the community defeat in 2021. That was that U-turn by Modi I referred to. But this time, this threat it's not just coming from New Delhi, it's being imported, sadly, from the United States. This is United States big corporations, this great juggernaut, profitable, powerful, wealthy juggernaut of US big business is coming in to steamroller the Punjab. And Narendra Modi is opening the door and shaking the hand. But this is also where we see this unreliability of India as an ally. Now, Amit Shah is there in Moga, promising to make Punjab drug-free and conversion-free. I mean, they're just typical BJP rhetoric. I'm laughing because he actually said, we'll make Punjab drug-free. This is one of the representatives of that secret agenda that's probably behind pouring the drugs into Punjab. But anyway, that's why I'm chuckling at that. Amit Shah's government is hiding the fine print of this deal that could basically destroy, annihilate the dairy and cotton sectors of parts of the Punjab, particularly the Malwa region. Now, the farmers themselves, they're demanding, firstly, they want a complete exclusion of agriculture from the Indo-US trade deal, saying, look, you've got to take our sector out of that trade deal. Secondly, they want a guarantee, a legally binding guarantee for what's called the minimum support price, as per the Swaminathan formula. And this was actually, again, this is what was demanded in the original farmers' protest back in 2021 and 2020. And thirdly, the withdrawal of the Electricity Amendment Bill and the Seed Act, which they fear, these two pieces of legislation, will privatise their basic resources and patent the actual seeds that they're planting. So again, this basically gives the state, and by the state effectively read private enterprise, in other words, these big corporations, it gives them complete control over the seeds that these guys are planting. They patent the seeds, so these guys will find it difficult to get hold of seeds that they can plant without having to pay extra premiums to these big corporations who basically can hold them to ransom. If you want seed, you've got to pay us large amounts of money. Again, this is how big business, these big corporations have controlled the agricultural sectors right across the world, particularly domestically. But there's one angle here that even the mainstream is ignoring. Last week, particularly over the weekend, but in the Punjab Legislative Assembly, New Delhi, cozying up to the United States and Israel, ironic as that is, the Punjab Assembly stood in a moment of silence for the people of Iran. Now, they were specifically honouring the 165 schoolgirls and the Iranian leadership killed in the US-Israeli strikes on February the 28th. Now, think about the significance of that. Punjab is the only state in India to formally acknowledge those deaths. And this is a direct public rejection of New Delhi's foreign policy. Punjab is saying, you may be a client state of the West, but we stand with the victims of imperial aggression. So this is where we start entering some really complex dynamics of this whole Iran conflict, the US-India tie-up, the BRICS economies. And again, as I often say, it's not black and white. And it's really complex what's going on here. Because there are strong ties between the people of Iran and the people of India, the ordinary people of India. There are also strong ties, as we'll discover, I'll talk about in a moment, between the Indian government and the Iranian government. But they're very different ties, these. We have the authoritarian government of India very close to the authoritarian government of Iran, which is deeply disjointed, hated by the people of Punjab particularly, but also the people of Iran. So again, you've got these two tiers of alliances, but they represent very, very different states of mind. And it does actually come round to my analytical conclusion of all this. India, as I've often said, is basically presenting two faces to the world. To Washington, it is this reliable ally against China, willing to basically trade away its farmers' livelihoods for the high-tech drones and trade concessions. In other words, it's saying to America, don't worry, I'll sell out. Modi's saying, I'll sell out our farmers in Punjab, it doesn't matter, but let's have trade deals. And it's to the people of Punjab and to the Sikh people who lead these movements. India is basically it's an unreliable, authoritarian state that weaponises the law, like the UAPA, the new labour codes, etc., to suppress any region that dares have its own voice. And Amit Shah's Badlav rally, it wasn't about change, it was all about control. It was an attempt to break the spirit of the farmers' unions and the Sikh organisations that have constantly, persistently challenged the BJP's One Nation, One Law agenda. So when you look at, let's say, the US Govt report and their findings on Raw's transnational repression, with the fact now that Punjab is now openly defying India's trade and foreign policy, openly calling it a new West India company, in other words, openly saying we're being colonised by India, you start to see a bit of a clearer picture. India is not a stable partner for the West. It is not reliable. It is a nation in internal conflict. Yes, it is this internal conflict, why it's fragmenting, where the state must resort to lawfare and these intelligence plots just to keep its own citizens and its most productive region, its own breadbasket, under its thumb. And Western powers believe they're buying a partner in Modi. What they're actually doing is essentially they're subsidising a regime that is losing the moral and political consent of its own people. So it's always comes back to this one conceptual thought. Is India a reliable partner? Well, India isn't just unreliable on an international stage, it's unreliable internally. Punjab can't trust its own government. The burning effigies right across the Punjab of a senior government minister. That's what they think of their government. There you go. And I now want to look at a linked story about this. Talking about India's double game. This is quite shocking again. And again, I'm going to bring in the Iran element into this. Sikhs for Justice posted up a day or two ago this post. And again, this highlights something very concerning. It's highlighting a glaring contradiction in Delhi's foreign policy. This strategic tightrope, you can call it, between its commitment to Western partnerships and, of course, its deepening military and economic ties to Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. This post says, the Modi government didn't just, it armed Iran with Pinaka rockets and artillery. Indian arms shipments arrived at the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. And Iran allowed safe passage to Indian ships. So again, you can start to see the depths of an alliance between Iran and India. India has this, I often call it a schizophrenic stance. It's not just a diplomatic aberration, a quirk, whatever you want to call it. It's a calculated attempt to extract maximum benefit from both sides. As I always say, India tries to play all sides for its own benefit, but maintaining zero long-term loyalty to any side. And I want to take a look through the lens of the latest Russia, India, North Korea developments like this, just to talk about how unreliable India is and how it's going to affect the Sikh community and the Khalistan movement. So, first of all, let's have a look at this.
ਲਓ ਜੀ ਕੱਲ ਦੀ ਰੈਲੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਤਿਆਰੀਆਂ ਇਰਾਨ's Khamenei dead, India's Khamenei alive. Khalistan salutes America, brave soldier. ਲਓ ਜੀ ਤਿਆਰ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਕਾਰ ਰੈਲੀ ਦੇ ਲਈ, ਕਾਰ ਟਰੱਕ ਰੈਲੀ ਲਈ ਵੱਡੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਸਾਈਨ। 22 ਮਾਰਚ ਨੂੰ ਵੋਟਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਿਆਟਲ 'ਚ ਤੇ ਕੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਟਰੱਕ ਕਾਰ ਰੈਲੀ। Iran's Khamenei dead, India's Khamenei alive.
Now, this is quite complex. I just referred to this earlier. There is this two-tier connection between India and Iran. Ordinary Indian people have a deep tie to the ordinary people of Iran for historic reasons, and there is a friendship there. As indeed, strange enough, there is a friendship between the ordinary Iranian people and the British people. We've got a lot of shared history in that region. So we actually personally have no argument, there is no animosity between ordinary British people and ordinary Iranian people. In fact, quite the opposite. We feel deep sorrow for the suffering. So there is that connection between the Indian people and, of course, Sikhs, and I see this right across social media. There are many people in the Sikh community who hate this attack on Iran because basically they're seeing it as an attack on the Iranian people. And that again implies this deep connection between many Sikhs and the Sikh community and ordinary Indians with ordinary people of Iran. But I've also referred to this link between the governments of Iran and the government of India. And this is why this video, Iran's Khomeini is dead, India's Khomeini is dead, because now this disjoint where the ordinary people are seeing both their leaders as these ayatollahs, as these authoritarian regimes, and celebrating the death of Ayatollah Khomeini. And they're saying that Modi is India's Ayatollah, India's Khomeini. So again, you start to see sort of the complexity of all this. But anyway, what really matters amongst all this from a geopolitical perspective is who are the governments allying with? Who are tying up deals? Who's working behind the scenes in this great global game of geopolitics? Well, let me play you another video. This is the Iran ambassador speaking. And again, his words are pretty significant.
India is our suffering, and vice versa. And for this reason, governments of India help us. And we should help the government of India because we have common faith, common interest. We believe, as an ambassador in India, we believe that we have common faith in the region. And for this reason, all the high-ranking officials from Iran instructed the embassy of Iran in India that paved the way for the Indian government.
So, essentially, he's just confirming this deep link between Modi and the Iranian regime. And I'm going to be unambiguous and say that the Iranian regime is deeply, deeply dangerous, and it is quashed the Iranian people in the most horrendous manner. We talk about the evils of the Indian government and the massacres of, well, Muslims, Sikhs, you name your minority of choice. And we've got lots of examples of each of those. But essentially, the Iranian ambassador is saying, yeah, we're working together. We have close ties between Modi and the Iranian regime. And I think that in itself speaks volumes. And we talked about in his past stories about how India is treating its own people, the laws it weaponizes, the farmers it's betraying, whatever. But I want to look also at the face that India is now showing to the world through this post, because this post gives a hint to a lot of what's going on. It basically cuts right to the heart of what's going on. It's highlighting a reality that Washington seems rather desperate to ignore. India is taking billions of US technology and trade concessions, but at the same time, it's anchoring itself to the same regimes that the West considers its greatest existential threats. And this is why Trump is bombing Iran. And I have to say, I support the whole idea. If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, God help the world. And I only need to talk about suicide bombers to give you a clue to the mindset of extremists in Islam. They are prepared to martyr themselves. And you give these guys a nuclear bomb, it's game over for the world. As soon as some religious zealot gets his hand on the button, that's it, it's game over. That's how serious this is. And so many people, we don't like war. We'll always try and prevent war when we can. But we have to, at all costs, literally almost at all costs, to stop these religious extremists getting their hands on the nuclear button. Because everywhere else, every other nuclear power, even India, at least has a sense of self-preservation. They know the concept of mutually assured destruction. They know if they push a nuclear button, everybody dies. Not just their enemy, but they die too. Everybody dies once that nuclear button is pressed. But these guys, these extremists, don't care about that. They're martyred. They'll go see their 24 virgins, or whatever it is. That's the problem. That's why it's absolutely imperative Iran and these extremists must not get their hands on nuclear technology. Anyway, that's just my personal, unambiguous opinion on this. And as I say, it's so important. But as I say, this post is actually highlighting this really worrying, significant link between Iran and India. And it's not just about balancing anymore. It's India isn't just really trying to balance all the sides together. It's playing a double game that is increasingly proving India to be the most unreliable ally in that region. And if we look at the facts, in September last year at the SCO summit in China, in Tianjin, the world saw these optics, these visuals that should have ended India as a Western bulwark idea forever. Prime Minister Modi didn't just attend that summit in China. He appeared in what experts are calling a deadly pact alongside Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, even Kim Jong-un from North Korea was there, Belarus. I mean, all the authoritarian regimes of the world were there, and so was Narendra Modi. I mean, how obvious is it? And the Trump administration was busy crafting an interim trade deal with Modi. At the same time, Modi was praising his excellent bilateral meetings with Putin and Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un. But it's this North Korea connection that truly exposes this schizophrenia. The US and its allies are sounding the alarm over North Korean troops being deployed to help Russia in Ukraine. As many as 12,000, according to the latest intelligence. But where does India stand? Well, India is the only member of the Quad, the alliance that includes the US, Japan and Australia, that maintains full diplomatic relations with North Korea. Now think about that. Japan and South Korea are living under the constant fear of Kim Jong-un's missiles, North Korean missiles. Missiles built with technology that USGOV and others fear could leak through the Russia-North Korea-Pakistan pipeline. New Delhi continues to provide food, medicine, diplomatic cover to North Korea. And this isn't non-alignment, this is strategic, what's called duplicity. And let's talk about the money. This is the lifeblood of Putin's war machine, which is oil. Look at this graph. This is from 2024, but the same is reflected the following year. Who bought Russia's oil? China first, India second, despite international sanctions. In 2021, Russian crude made up just 3% of India's imports, but by 2025, it was 40%. India's oil imports, are 40% Russian oil. And just last week, the Indian government issued a statement rejecting the need for US permission to buy Russian oil. Even as the Trump administration issued a temporary waiver to prevent a global energy collapse due to the ongoing Iran conflict. So India said, I don't care. You can't tell us to stop buying Russian oil. But India's supposed to be an ally. But India is effectively telling the West, we'll take your high-tech drones, we'll take your MQ-9B Predators to monitor our borders, but we'll use the money we save to fund the very man that you're trying to stop in Europe. What sort of relationship is this? India's feeding on Western technology like a parasite to build its domestic security state to spy and surveil on Sikhs, while providing the economic oxygen Russia needs to keep its war going in Ukraine. And the Sikhs for Justice post highlights a specific incident that perfectly captures this unreliability. In late last year and into January this year, intelligence reports surfaced and noted during the Raisina dialogue in 2026, European leaders are terrified. Why? Because they fear the technology that they're sharing with India is now ending up in Moscow's hands. And the European Council on Foreign Relations called it a nightmare scenario. He said, you share high-end technology with a partner in Delhi, and because that partner is fundamentally anchored to Putin's special and privileged strategic partnership, that technology finds its way into the hands of the principal security threat to Europe. So India isn't a bulwark, a firewall against autocracy. It's a conduit. It's an open door into people like Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, Iran's Khomeini. And look at the December summit last year in Delhi. There he is, Modi. He was given a state visit by Putin. They signed Programme 2030, a strategic roadmap for economic cooperation. Now, the rest of the democratic world treats Putin as a pariah. Modi's hugging him, physically hugging him. And then Modi turns around and tells Washington that India is the, quote, essential partner for the 21st century. And this is this schizophrenia that I talk about and Sikhs for Justice are talking about. It's an ally that wants the benefits of the West, but the values of the East. It wants US security guarantees, but Russian weapons and North Korean diplomatic flexibility. So the conclusion is pretty simple. India isn't an ally, it's what's called a wild card. Its strategic autonomy is this sort of phrase it uses. It's just a polite way of saying it has no permanent friends, only permanent interests. And right now those interests include building a Hindu nationalist state, a Hindu Rashtra, that looks more like Xi's China or Putin's Russia than the world's largest democracy it's claiming to be. And when the West finally ever realises that India is not a reliable counterweight to China, but a player in a very different game, one where it plays both sides against the middle, the West is betting the house on a partner that is already hedging its bets with the enemy. So what does this mean, ultimately, to wrap this up? What does it mean for the Khalistan movement and the Sikh diaspora? Well, for decades, the Indian state has framed the Khalistan movement as a law and order issue. Really, this democratic, peaceful movement. They're saying it's a law and order issue, a fringe sentiment. It's a fringe movement, apparently, funded by the diaspora. But the dynamics this year have totally changed the script. What we're seeing today is the internationalisation of the Sikh issue. So when USGA, for example, calls for sanctions on RAW and the RSS, they're essentially acknowledging that the Indian state cannot coexist with Sikh political identity without resorting to violence. When Western governments, whether it's Canada, Washington, investigate Indian assassination plots, they're admitting that India's internal problems have now become a global security threat. And for the Sikh diaspora, this is a watershed moment. This is at a really significant time. And I've said last year, the first half of 2026 is going to be important. It is. In the past, the West could afford to ignore the human rights abuses in Punjab because they needed India as a democratic counterweight to China. But, as I've talked about all morning, that counterweight, it's a myth. It doesn't exist. India is unreliable. It's schizophrenic. It is a partner that takes your money and technology, but then hugs Vladimir Putin and maintains a back channel to North Korea and, of course, to Tehran. As the West trust in New Delhi continues to erode right across the board now, the Khalistan conversation is changing. It's no longer just about the right to self-determination, though that obviously remains the most important fundamental part of it. It's becoming a conversation about regional stability. And look at the Punjab today. It's a state that is openly defying Delhi. From the Assembly's silence for Iran to the farmers' rejection, the burning of the effigies of Amit Shah. Punjab is already acting as a distinct political entity. Look at the rise of Amritpal Singh, Shiromani Akali Dal, Waris Punjab Day, the election of figures like Amritpal and Sarabjit Singh Khalsa to the Indian Parliament, even while one remains behind bars, shows unequivocally, unambiguously, clearly, the sentiment for sovereignty for Khalistan has moved from the Punjabi fields now to the ballot box. And the double standards that we've discussed today, where India demands Western respect while acting like an autocracy, are precisely why the world is starting to look at the Sikh diaspora's demands with new eyes. A sovereign Khalistan wouldn't just be a buffer state or a threat, it would be a stable, democratic and, keyword, reliable partner in a region currently defined by India's unpredictability. So, how close do we think we are? Well, history tells us that states don't collapse when they're strong. They collapse when they're inconsistent. India is currently trying to maintain a Hindu nationalist core, a Western democratic facade, and an Eastern military alliance. It's a house divided against itself. It is so schizophrenic, it doesn't know really what it does represent. The cracks are there. The diaspora is no longer just sending money home. They are the vanguard of this fight. They're the ones forcing US Congress to pass things like the Transnational Repression Reporting Act. They're the ones turning the Seattle referendum into a global statement of intent. And as a final thought, the road to sovereignty is never paved with easy victories. It's paved with the exposure of the oppressor's weaknesses. This is what we're doing. Today, the Indian state is more exposed than it has been in at least 40 years. Its laws are now publicly, in official reports, being called weapons. Its intelligence agencies are being called out as terrorist entities by US commissions. And its alliances are being exposed as duplicity. So, for the Sikh community, the message is very, very clear. Stay organised, stay incisive, and most importantly, stay vocal, stay visible, because the world is finally starting to see India through the same lens that we have for a very, very long time. So keep those Khalistan flags flying. That, as we often say, and thanks to that original commenter, the Khalistan Express has left the station. It's now thundering down the tracks, and people are starting to see it thundering down. So there you go. Right, let's move on to our comments column. A lot to get through, running out of time already. Gosh, I have to whip through these very quickly. Sufton Muffins, hello Sufton Muffins. Punjab is not India only. We are slaves, but soon there will be a trial balance of the Brahmins. Indeed, as I say, the Khalistan Express is coming. Don't worry, not going to be slaves for long. Cam K says India's become irrelevant on the global scene. Illiterate Modi and his cronies think that silence is the best policy. Yeah, I agree. As I just talked about, India is losing its potential. It had so much potential, and thanks to Modi and the RSS, it's going to break up. And from those ashes will rise new nations like Khalistan. 1S1 and 2. You can only feel shame if you have a moral compass. The Indian army is only brave against civilians. We already know that. Yeah, indeed. India has no shame because it has no, or the RSS have no moral compass. You only need to look at all the massacres, the genocides that have happened against Sikh people, against Muslims, Christians. There is no moral compass. Pam Atwal, Sikhs who represent the RSS aren't true Sikhs. Probably get paid. Yes, they do. We often talk about the fake Sikhs and how they've infiltrated all sorts of positions of power, claiming to represent the Panth, and of course they don't. Satbachan Singh, this is an important comment. Thank you for this one. We must investigate the contents of the Iranian ship, the Dina, the one that was sunk. Guarantee that it was carrying arms made by India to use against the USA. Again, yes, you bring up this link between the Modi government and the Iranian government. Just what actually is going on there? India is providing arms to Iran to fight its supposed ally, the United States. Do me a favour. And then you talk at length about how India has assisted Afghanistan, the Taliban regime. Now, of course, the US and the West filled Afghanistan with weapons and technology during the 1980s. I was there in 1986 fighting the Russians with what is now today's Taliban. But ultimately, this just shows the changing dynamics over time, is that suddenly our allies, the Western allies at the time that were fighting the Russians, the Mujahideen, then evolved, the extremist end evolved into the Taliban. Not all of it, I have to say, but certainly the extremist end then became the Taliban. And now the Taliban has got this alliance with India, which again, watch my podcast in the past with Bhajan Singh Binder. We talk a lot about this alliance between Afghanistan, which again was allied with Russia, particularly during the Soviet invasion, with Delhi at the time, And they would turn their guns, essentially, metaphorically and physically speaking, against Pakistan. So, as you say, India at the time was training Afghans to become doctors, teachers, technology, warfare, etc. So, at the same time that Pakistan was allying with the US. In other words, the alliances in the region are very complex, but very clear. You can't trust India. India supports the Taliban, and it has. There was a CIA whistleblower on YouTube in an interview admitted Indian intelligence has been working with the Taliban. Again, the enemies of the United States and the West. And stay safe. Yeah, you're absolutely right in this. Again, I talk about God help us if Islamic extremists get their hands on nuclear weaponry. If the Taliban have a nuclear arms facility, yeah, I mean, God help us. This is what it's all about. We've got to stop these lunatics getting their hands on the ultimate weapon, because we all die. Everybody dies. Literally, everybody dies. Punjab, thank you. Who polices the police in India? Good question. The whole world knows that India can't even protect its own country. Yeah, you talk about the incursions of China that Modi tries to keep quiet, and the Gaudiya media never highlight the fact 4,000 square kilometres of India have been relinquished to China. And what's Modi doing about it? Nothing. As you're right to say, only Indians believe the propaganda. Well, of course they do. They're indoctrinated by the Gaudiya media. They're banned from accessing channels like us. They can't hear the truth. They're spoon-fed a complete set of Gaudiya media lies, propaganda. They have 209 out of 298 cities, which are like landfills. They've no shame. Dirty, mannerless, ignorant chapal wearers. Yeah. Again, I don't attack personally. I don't attack the ordinary Indian people. It's not their fault. They're just ordinary people trying to live their lives. But they are sadly spoon-fed propaganda. And they believe it. And that's why we need more ordinary, decent Indians to watch channels like ours, to hear just how much they're being lied to. And then you talk about Nancy Grewal. It's a Jat surname. She was a Hindu, Anita Agnihotri. She was an upper caste Brahmin. Yeah, as you're right to say, it's just one of many ways to try and manipulate audiences to go against the Khalistan movement. Get this message out. Absolutely, Punjab. I'll do my best. These influencers, they are dangerous. You've got to check who they really are and who's paying them, ultimately. Because most of these influencers only exist because they're being paid by someone to send a message. So if that person who's paying the influencer happens to be the RSS, then of course they're going to be anti-Khalistan. In other words, they're manipulating their audience to turn against things like the Khalistan movement. And these influencers, they play a dangerous game. As it turned out, poor Nancy Grewal paid with it with her life. Very sad. And yeah, thank you. Have a great day. Well, a great day to you, Punjab. Thank you for your contribution. Now, delighted to say, Critics Corner has returned. Hey, hello, Tiger. Thank you. Go back home to your damp England. Time to make Khalistan in Canada, USA. I should pack my bags and go back home to damp England. Living in stolen country, Canada, USA. Yeah, well, actually I'm not. I mean, I am in damp England, and you're absolutely right. England is a damp, grey, miserable place at times, but it is also our homeland. So, but ultimately, talking of homelands, Khalistan, which part of this do you not understand? We don't want to make Khalistan in Canada or USA. That's not what we're campaigning for. Khalistan belongs in Khalistan, the geographical region that will include Punjab, but all being well, hopefully, it will include that whole strip between Pakistan and India. That's what it's all about. Interesting. You talk about Max Arthur McAuliffe. Again, this is all part of this propaganda. Who I think in the 1880 he came out with this idea. You claim, as many Hindutva bots claim, the Hindutva idea is that this guy, this Irish guy, Max Arthur McAuliffe, invented the Khalistan movement to try and get Sikhs on side with the British Empire. Really? So let's just ignore then the Sikh Empire and Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Let's just ignore all that cultural heritage and history that united the Sikh people into one of the greatest empires the earth has ever seen. That's it's irrelevant, isn't it? That's nothing to do with the Khalistan movement. That's nothing to do with why Sikhs today and since 1849 have wanted their own homeland again. No, it was all invented by this Irish guy. I don't think so, really. But thank you, Tiger. Thank you for your contribution. And yes, I have returned to damp England. And come and join me. I'll buy you a beer. We can chat about it. Anyway, thank you for appearing on Critics Corner. We don't have enough Critics Corner, sadly. So if you want to have a pop at the show or pop at me, do it. Let's have a bit of chat. And next up, this is the final set. Thank you, Gurmohan Grewal. Sat Sri Akal to you and Sat Sri Akal to all our audience. Thank you for being there. Thank you for your loyalty. As you know, I'm deeply appreciative for all your comments. Baldev Singh, thanks, Angus, for being a true journalist. Actually, no, what this is about is I'm not a true journalist. I'm a journalist who just brings you the truth. That's all it is. That's my job. That's why I'm here. As I say, it's so important that ordinary Indians particularly get to hear the truth. So I'm just here as a conduit. I'm nothing more than a messenger. That is all I am. I am here to bring in the truth and regurgitate it and try to bring it to as many people as I can. That's all I am. I am but the messenger. Bachan Kaur Bachan. I love you, Khalistan, Punjab, don't we all? Sikhs for Justice, Zindabad. And a bit of Punjabi there. I can't quite translate. And here's an interesting fact for you. If it's written in Punjabi script, Google Translate will translate it. But if it's written in Latin characters like that, it can't translate it. So I can never translate. If you guys write anything in sort of the English alphabet, Google Translate can't translate it. So I don't know what that means. Maybe you can let me know. Thank you. And the final sign-off, Jaskarat Singh, Gurpreet Katrao, Khalsa Ajit Singh, Wegurji Khalsa Bahiji Ki Fateh, Chadi Kala, Khalistan Zindabad, Khalistan Zindabad. Love hearts and thumbs up. Why not? Absolutely. And of course, that'll bring us to the end of today's show, the first show of the week. Thank you to all of you. Thanks for all your contributions. Very much appreciated. Thank you for all your loyalty. Do keep the comments coming in. Don't forget to email me if you come across interesting stories or snippets of information that you think is worthy of a bit more research and worthy of talking about. Give me some feedback. Let me know your thoughts on the show. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about, etc., etc. But as I say, I do read every single email. I do read every single comment that comes in. Thank you for all your contributions. I couldn't do the show without you. Perspectives would not be here without you guys. So spread the word, please. Let's get the numbers up if we can. But that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. God willing, I will see you tomorrow.